In a small and secluded village, surrounded by the thick foliage of a forest, there lived an elderly man named Don Alejandro. Throughout his life, he had witnessed the transformation of his home, once filled with laughter and family. Now, only memories remained. His wife had passed away years ago, and his children lived in distant cities. Despite the solitude, he kept himself busy tending to his garden and fishing in the nearby river. One autumn afternoon, as the leaves fell in shades of orange and gold, Don Alejandro was returning home after a long walk through the woods. While crossing a small wooden bridge, something unusual caught his eye. At the edge of the path, a strange figure appeared, partially hidden among the trees. It was a young woman, but not of this world. Her skin glowed with a soft green radiance, and her long silver hair floated as if suspended in the air. Her deep blue gaze reflected a mix of confusion and need. Don Alejandro, always kind-hearted, approached cautiously. "Are you lost, dear?" he asked softly, concerned for the young woman's well-being. The girl lifted her head, looking curiously at the man, as if trying to understand his words. Calmly. Finally, she spoke with a melodious yet somewhat agitated voice. "I am seeking refuge. My ship has malfunctioned. I cannot return." "Come," said Don Alejandro, extending a warm hand. "I will give you food and water, and you can rest here tonight. It is not safe to wander alone in these woods, especially as night falls." The young woman nodded slowly and followed him as he led her to his home. Don Alejandro settled her in the small living room, offering her a bowl of hot soup. She accepted gratefully, but something about her demeanor seemed strange. She remained tense, as if in constant alertness. Once she finished the soup, she stood up quickly. "Thank you. But I must leave," she said, her voice now more urgent. Don Alejandro looked at her in confusion. "Do not go, my child. It is late, and the weather is changing. You should stay here. Tomorrow I will help you find what you seek." However, the girl appeared anxious, glancing out the window toward the dark forest, as if something were calling her. "I cannot. There is something I need to do," she murmured. Don Alejandro decided to let her be, thinking perhaps there was something she needed to resolve on her own. Yet, as the night wore on, he noticed something peculiar. The girl seemed restless. Her movements grew more erratic, and at times, strange whispers echoed that he could not comprehend. At midnight, he awoke to a strange sound coming from the forest, followed by a subtle vibration that coursed through the ground. Looking out the window, he saw lights glowing in the distance, gliding between the trees like shooting stars. A wave of fear washed over him, but he thought he must be dreaming. When he returned to the living room, he found the young woman standing by the fireplace, her face illuminated by the flickering light. "I'm sorry, old man," she said softly. I did not tell you the whole truth. I am from a distant planet, and I am in an important stage of my cycle." Don Alejandro frowned, not entirely understanding. "Cycle?" "Yes," the girl replied, now with a more determined and profound gaze. "My kind has seasons, times when we must connect, seek a partner. I am in the midst of my mating season. I need to find a companion." The old man blinked, struggling to grasp what he was hearing. "What do you mean by that?" The girl stepped closer, her presence powerful and strange. "What I mean, dear man, is that your warmth, your energy, your being, attract me in a way I do not comprehend. I am almost out of control." Don Alejandro's heart raced, and an inexplicable warmth enveloped him. His eyes, though old and weary, met hers as if something were invading him from within. The young woman took another step forward, her fingers brushing the air as if she wanted to touch him but hesitated. "But I don't understand," whispered Don Alejandro, unable to look away from her. "I am just an old man." She smiled, a smile that seemed otherworldly. "In my world, age is not a barrier. What matters is the connection, the desire that can ignite between us. Just know that I must warn you, my nature is more intense than you can imagine." Suddenly, Don Alejandro felt a burning in his chest, an energy he did not know the source of, but which invaded him with every breath. "What if I do not want this?" he asked, though his body was already responding differently. The girl moved even closer, her lips barely inches from his. "Then I will leave you, but who knows if this moment will ever happen again." The tension grew in the room.
The lights outside flickered brightly, and the sounds of the forest seemed to grow nearer, more urgent. Something was happening. Don Alejandro, though still confused, felt an irresistible attraction toward her, as if his fate were intertwined with hers in a way he could not comprehend. And so, on this strange night, while the wind howled outside the house, they remained in silence, unsure of how or why, but with the feeling that something much greater was about to unfold. Don Alejandro was on the brink of desperation between desire and confusion. The young woman, with her eyes filled with an unusual brightness and her enveloping presence, seemed not of this world. Each word she spoke, each glance, made him feel an inexplicable pull, as if something primordial within him was awakening. His mind struggled to understand what was happening, but his body was already reacting in ways he could not control. "I must go," whispered the young woman, pulling away slightly, but not before stealing a glance that seemed to pierce his soul. "My cycle does not stop. If you do not find an answer within yourself, I will seek elsewhere." But something in her voice, something in her sadness, made Don Alejandro hesitate. His hands trembled as he approached her, unable to articulate a coherent word. The girl, who had shown an almost celestial serenity until that moment, now revealed a vulnerability she had never displayed. Don Alejandro could see her body emitting a soft glow, as if she were struggling with her nature. "What if I do not want you to leave?" he asked, his voice lower, softer, unwilling to let her go. "What if what you offer is not just your body but something more?" The young woman hesitated for a moment, her breathing quickening slightly, and her lips curved into a wistful smile. "What I offer is much more than that. But for my kind, physical desire cannot be separated from mental and emotional connection. My cycle demands it, and so do I." Don Alejandro felt a growing pressure in his chest. The idea of losing himself in this bond with a being from another world terrified and attracted him at the same time. He knew something deeply mysterious and powerful was about to happen, something that would change his life forever, but he was unsure if it was something he could bear. "Then what must I do?" he said, almost in a whisper, as if those words were the key to opening a door he could not see the end of. The girl stepped closer, letting her glow illuminate his face, highlighting the creases of his skin and making his eyes shine with a deep blue, as if an endless ocean reflected within them. You must decide, Don Alejandro. In my kind, the union is not merely a physical encounter. It is a bond, an irreversible change. You could not undo it. Are you willing to pay the price?" "What price?" he asked, breathless, his thoughts clouded by emotion and confusion. "The price of losing yourself, of becoming one with someone who does not belong to your world, who could change everything. Are you willing to yield, not knowing what will come next?" The girl smiled again, this time with a mix of tenderness and challenge. "Do you still doubt what I offer?" Don Alejandro closed his eyes for a moment, searching for clarity in a sea of uncertainty. He felt the weight of the years in his bones, the loneliness that had accompanied him for so long, and the temptation of something unknown, something that had been torn from his control. Life had led him down lonely paths, but this young woman, this creature, seemed to offer him something he had never known. When he opened his eyes, he found her penetrating gaze. He could no longer turn back. It did not matter if he fully understood what was happening. There was something in his heart that told him he must not let her go. "Yes," he murmured, the word escaping his lips like a promise sealed in his soul. "Yes, I want to know what it is to be part of this. I want to understand what you offer." The young woman, upon hearing his response, seemed to relax in a way she had not shown before. Her body glowed a little more brightly, and a sense of calm spread through the room. Don Alejandro felt a wave of warmth enveloping him. But it was not the physical warmth he was accustomed to. It was something deeper, something that seemed to come from his very soul. "Then let me show you what you are capable of feeling," she said, her voice soft like a melody that swept him away. At that moment, the air filled with an indescribable energy, a vortex slowly swirling around them, filling the room with a sense of anticipation. It was as if time itself had suspended, waiting for them to take the next step, for them to decide which path to follow. "But be careful," the young woman warned with a serious look. "My cycle does not only change those who experience it, it changes everything. And after all this is over, You may no longer be who you are. All the memories you have may fade as if you never existed. Don Alejandro could not imagine how all of this could be true, but deep within his being, he knew that the decision he had made would mark the end of his life as he had known it. However, something inside him told him that this change, as strange and terrifying as it was what he had been waiting for, and though he did not know how this story would end, or what would happen next, he could no longer stop it. The young woman extended her hand toward him, and at the moment their fingers touched, an unknown energy began to course through his body, taking him to a place where reality and desire intertwined, where the boundaries between man and being from another world faded away. And as the night continued outside, he did not yet know whether the story of Don Alejandro and the extraterrestrial girl would be a blessing or a curse. But it no longer mattered. There was no turning back. The connection between them grew more intense, as if the very earth beneath their feet pulsed to the rhythm of their hearts. Don Alejandro could feel something within him changing, and as his hands intertwined with those of the young woman, a vibrant and unknown energy began to flow between them. Each breath they took seemed to merge, as if the air thickened with an invisible force wrapping around them, drawing them closer and closer. The extraterrestrial girl, seemingly aware of the transformation taking place, closed her eyes for a moment, allowing the glow of her skin to illuminate the room even more. "This," she said softly, but with a palpable intensity, "is only the beginning. What you are about to experience is unlike anything you have lived before." Don Alejandro felt his body filled with a strange and powerful energy, something he had never imagined possible. Every fiber of his being seemed to awaken with a new strength, as if his own life were being rewritten, page by page. The girl moved closer, her lips barely brushing against his, as if she were waiting for a response, a sign that he was ready for what was to come. "Are you ready to take the next step?" asked the young woman, her gaze fixed on him, deep and penetrating. "Your body is already ready. Your mind may still resist, but your entire being longs for it." Don Alejandro hesitated for a moment, still caught between reality and what was happening to him. Never before had he felt something so overwhelming, so enveloping. The idea of losing himself in this bond, of letting his life take such an unexpected turn, terrified him. But at the same time, something inside him told him it was what he needed, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life, without knowing it. "Yes. Yes," he finally murmured, his voice trembling yet sure. "Yes, I am ready." The young woman smiled, and as she did, the air seemed to charge with an even denser energy, as if the universe itself were paying attention to what was about to happen. Her glow intensified, and suddenly, Don Alejandro felt his body begin to burn, not with pain, but with a sensation of liberation, as if something within him, something hidden and deep, were finally awakening. The girl watched him, with a mix of fascination and tenderness, as if she were witnessing something only she could comprehend. "Remember," she said, almost in a whisper, "this union is not just a physical bond. It is a fusion of souls, a merging of beings from different worlds. You will not be able to return to being the same, nor will what you knew be the same. But do not fear, for what is to come is greater than you can imagine." As her words filled the air, Don Alejandro felt an indescribable warmth enveloping him completely, as if time stood still, as if the entire world were suspended. The cold of the night outside the house seemed to dissipate, replaced by a warm and enveloping temperature, a heat that did not come from any tangible source, but from the connection between them. The young woman, without taking her gaze off him, began to guide them toward the center of the room, where a soft light began to emanate from the floor. It was as if the very space was transforming, adapting to the energy they were generating together. Don Alejandro could see how the light reflected in the young woman's eyes, and in that instant, he understood that not only was his body changing, but his destiny as well. The girl began to move slowly, guiding their steps with an ethereal grace, and although Don Alejandro did not fully understand what was happening, he could not look away from her. His body responded perfectly, as if everything within him were synchronized with the flow of energy overflowing between them. "Let your mind be free," she whispered to him, drawing closer, her warm breath against his neck. "Only then will you be able to comprehend what is happening. Let go of fear, doubt, everything that holds you back." The air around them thickened,
and Don Alejandro felt every corner of his being touched by that cosmic energy. His body, though aged, began to feel more agile, stronger. It was as if his youth were being renewed, as if his essences were being restored by something beyond human understanding. And yet, as he felt this rebirth, he also realized that something else was happening. A change in his perception of the world. The objects that had once seemed familiar now shone with a strange light, as if everything in his life were being reinterpreted, illuminated under a new light, a new meaning. Time was no longer linear. Everything seemed to be happening at once, past, present, and future intertwined in a cosmic dance. "Your body is no longer just yours," said the young woman, her tone soft yet charged with the intensity of the energy between them. "Your being will merge with mine, and with it, the essence of my kind will become part of you. You will no longer be just a human man. You will be something more." Don Alejandro, unsure of what this transformation entailed, surrendered to the sensation. He closed his eyes, allowing the energy to envelop him completely. The young woman, with her delicate fingers, touched him gently on the chest, and at that moment, a wave of sensations coursed through him, filling him with a profound understanding, a vision of life and the universe he had never known. "Now you understand," she whispered, her voice resonating in his mind. "What connects us, what unites us, is greater than physical desire. It is the desire for eternity, the desire to be one with the cosmos." The room filled with blinding light, and for a moment, Don Alejandro believed his mind would overflow. But it was not fear he felt. It was wonder. It was awe. He was being transformed, and he still did not know if it would be for better or worse, but he knew with certainty that there was no turning back. The story between him and the young extraterrestrial would continue, and whatever happened next would be as mysterious and vast as the universe itself. The light in the room continued to grow, enveloping Don Alejandro and the young woman in a sphere of radiance so intense that everything else faded away. The only sensation that remained was the vibrant connection between their bodies and souls, a connection that transcended any logic or explanation. It was as if space itself had begun to bend, merging with a reality only they could experience. In that instant, the young extraterrestrial began to speak, her voice resonating like a distant echo, not only in his ears but also deep within his mind. "What you feel is not just yours, Don Alejandro. You are now a bearer of my lineage, a link between worlds. It is not merely an encounter. It is a destiny sealed by the stars." Don Alejandro tried to speak, but the words eluded him. His mind was overwhelmed by the intensity of the sensations. His heart beat with an unknown force, and in his veins coursed something that was not blood, but a living, cosmic energy flowing with the same power as the stars in the sky. The young woman smiled at his confusion, not with malice, but with a profound understanding, as if she knew what he was experiencing and even more beyond that. "What you are now," she said, moving closer and placing her hand over his heart, "is more than human. You are a bridge between our species and yours, but you will also be changed in ways you cannot yet understand." The room, which had been filled with light, began to slowly dissolve, but not alarmingly. It was as if everything around them were dematerializing, transforming into something new. The furniture, the walls, the ceiling, everything seemed to dissolve, leaving only the presence of the two of them in the center of a void that was now being filled with an energy that did not belong to this world. "What does all this mean?" Don Alejandro asked, his voice trembling, yet filled with a curiosity he had never experienced before. "It means you have taken the first step," replied the young woman, her tone soft but laden with mystery. "The first step to understanding that the universe is much larger than you could ever have imagined. What I offer is a part of myself, but what you will receive is not just mine. It is from all the worlds that exist." The sensation of transformation intensified as the young woman's words settled in his mind. Don Alejandro felt his being, his consciousness, expanding, as if everything around him were connecting through him. The young woman had not only entered his physical life, but also his mind, his memories, his perception of reality. Everything he had known until now seemed to be just a small fraction of what it truly was. "The universe is a bond," she said, with a calmness that contrasted with the storm of sensations Don Alejandro was experiencing. "A bond that will extend throughout your life, one that you cannot break. Even if you try to forget it, it will accompany you. My cycle, my lineage, has marked your destiny."
For a moment, the old man felt fear. The idea of losing himself in something so vast, of not being able to return to the life he knew, made him hesitate. "What will happen next?" he asked, now aware of the magnitude of what he was accepting. "What will I do when all this is over?" The young woman looked at him, and her smile softened. "Nothing will end, Don Alejandro.
Everything will begin. There is no ending to what we have initiated, only new stages. But if you wish to withdraw, if you do not want to be part of this destiny, you must accept it now. If not, there will be no turning back." Don Alejandro, with his heart racing and his mind still in a whirlwind of emotions, found himself at a crossroads. Yet something within him, something deep, told him there was no option to return. The life he had known, his world limited by time and space, was no longer sufficient for him. He could no longer see reality in the same way. "I will go with you," he finally said, his voice filled with resolve. "Whatever comes, I will face it. I cannot return to the life I had before." The young woman nodded, her expression calm and satisfied, as if she had been waiting for that answer. Suddenly, everything around them began to fade, not like a simple dream, but as a transfiguration of reality. Don Alejandro was no longer in his home. Now he and the young woman found themselves in a space beyond human limits, a cosmic void filled with stars and bright lights moving in patterns that defied any known logic. "The transition is complete," she said, as the stars around them aligned. "You have crossed the threshold, Don Alejandro. Welcome to a new beginning." And though he did not know what awaited them, Don Alejandro felt no fear. Instead, he felt a deep peace, an understanding that transcended everything he had known. He was ready to face whatever came, because he knew he was no longer alone. He had found his place in a universe much larger than he had ever dreamed. The stars moved around them, and for a moment everything seemed to stop, waiting for the next step. As the stars spun around them, Don Alejandro felt the sensation of infinity enveloping him. But this time, no longer with the anguish of the unknown. There was no fear, only a tranquil acceptance of what he had chosen. The young extraterrestrial, now completely by his side, smiled with an expression that seemed to blend passion, love, and wisdom. "This is your new home," she said softly, pointing to the stars twinkling around them, so close they almost seemed to touch. "Here, your soul can expand beyond human limitations. This is just the beginning. But together we will create something that transcends." Don Alejandro gazed at the stars, now understanding what had happened. He was no longer the old, lonely man he once was, but someone with a new mission, with a new life. His body had rejuvenated, but beyond that, his consciousness had expanded. He felt one with the universe, with everything in it, with what was to come. The young woman offered her hand, and he accepted it without hesitation. Together, they ventured into the vast darkness of space, guided by a gentle light emanating from her like a newborn star. As they drifted away, the reality of his old home disappeared, replaced by a new existence, where there were no limits, only infinite possibilities. The destiny of Don Alejandro and the young extraterrestrial was sealed, a destiny that transcended the confines of time and space, where love, the fusion of two species, and the mystery of the universe would be the constant that bound them together forever. And so, in the immensity of the cosmos, their story continued, an eternal cycle that neither time could halt.